William Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564 under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. He was the oldest of 8 siblings, and his father, John Shakespeare, was a glove maker and was also involved in the illegal wool trade. William grew up learning Latin at school until he was 13 years old. At this point, his father was caught and fined for selling sheep's wool without a licence and could no longer afford to pay for William's education. When he was 18, he married Anne Hathaway. She was 26 at the time and would have been considered to be a witch if she didn't get married soon. Together, they had 3 children, Susanna and the twins, Hamnet and Judith. For 7 years, there are few verified records of Shakespeare's life, as variations of his name were very common in England. In fact, Shakespeare spells his own name differently on all 6 of the remaining documents with his signature, so it's tricky to understand what he was doing at the time. Some accounts suggest that he may have fled Warwickshire after he poached a deer. Another suggests he moved to look after the horses of theatregoers in London. One record suggests he may have even become a schoolmaster. What we do know is that Shakespeare developed a talent for writing. By 1592, he was performing in London and occasionally submitting his own plays to be performed. The company saw that his plays drew the biggest crowds, despite fellow playwrights mocking him and his work. A few years earlier, Christopher Marlowe had been murdered in a bar fight, and another writer, Ben Jonson, had been branded with a T on his thumb for murder too. Not exactly a great crowd to be around, but Shakespeare continued writing plays at an impressive rate. His plays were exclusively performed by the Lord Chamberlain's men, and huge audiences would flock to the Globe to see the productions. Queen Elizabeth's passion for theatre and the works of Shakespeare helped him become even more of a success. His history plays often skewed real historical events and figures to make the reigning family, the Tudors, look as good as possible. If he was seen to be mocking or offending the wrong people, he could have been banned from the theatre, arrested, or even beheaded. King James was a big fan of Shakespeare's plays too. He helped finance the bigger productions, and the Lord Chamberlain's men were rebranded the King's Men. Shakespeare continued to send money back to Stratford-upon-Avon, where his wife, children and parents lived. He invested the rest of the money into special effects for his bigger shows. His son Hamnet died at the age of 11 due to the bubonic plague. This prompted Shakespeare to write more of his tragedies. These normally included lots of gruesome and creative deaths, which include poisoning, stabbing, beheading and being baked into a pie. His comedies, on the other hand, would often end with a wedding and contain characters disguising themselves, often as a different gender, and playing tricks on each other. At the time, women were not allowed to perform in the plays, which meant that young men would play the roles of the female characters. This means that in some of the comedies, there could be a man playing a woman playing a man. Going to the theatre became a popular pastime in Tudor England, and would often be a whole-day event. Queen Elizabeth would even order plays to be written and performed at her court. Wealthy audience members would sit upstairs in the gallery. The poorer people would have to stand up for the whole show and would often become noisy and restless throughout the day. They were known as groundlings or stinkers. Due to the amount of noise generated by the crowds throughout the day, Shakespeare would often write lines for characters to deliver to the audience at the end of a scene to summarise what had just happened for the people who missed it the first time. If you weren't enjoying the play, you could stand and chat to the people around you, or buy snacks to either eat or throw at an actor you didn't like. In 1613, during a production of Henry VIII, a special effect involving a cannon accidentally burned the Globe Theatre to the ground. The company began to rebuild the structure, but Shakespeare decided to retire to Stratford to be with his family. During his lifetime, Shakespeare wrote 38 plays, 154 sonnets, and a handful of poems. It's also suggested that Shakespeare helped to translate the first English edition of the Bible, cleverly hiding his name in Psalm 46. Shakespeare died in 1616, unaware of the huge impact he would have on the world and the English language. His plays are still being performed across the world to audiences of all ages today.